I'll start the class now. Is it visible? My slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we would like to finish the slide about PAM today. Okay, and it would be better if we have time to discuss about one example. And then on next lecture on Thursday, we will start a new topic about the compressor. Okay. So last week I briefly explained about the head and energy equation about the pump. So if you have any question about that, please let me know. Basically, be aware with the 4 reference point that you want to compare. This is the source. Usually it will be used to calculate the total head requirement from the source to the destination. Okay. So use Bernoulli between those 2 points. Okay, so that's 2 important parts, and then as well as 2 another important points, which is the point 3 and point 4. Okay, that's the suction, and 4 is the discharge of the pump. Okay, so a lot of times we use Bernoulli 1 and 2. Bernoulli. So between 1 and 2, that's the overall energy balance, about the overall pumping requirement, overall energy balance. And then some of another important Bernoulli to be applied is actually between 1 and 3. That's as well a very important Bernoulli sequence. So you compare between the source and the suction. This is related with the NPSH calculation, how to prevent any cavitation. So to prevent cavitation, we're not talking about the destination, it's just ensuring that the liquid entering the pump at point 3, it has to be completely liquid. We want to avoid vapor at all costs, not at the source point, but more importantly at the suction point of the pump. Okay. And if you just want to focus on the 3 to 4, so between the suction and discharge of the pump, that's actually the head generated by the pump, or the pump curve, head generated by pump. Okay, so that's the 3 I think important sequence that you have to understand one by one, and what's the purpose about the comparison between those 2 points. Okay, by pump. Okay, so I will continue my explanation about the NPSH to prevent any cavitation. So we have separated two parts of the pump. So everything from the discharge can be merged into one discharge of the head, and including the elevation, the pressure, the velocity, and everything at the suction part can be classified at the SS. Okay, so I'll skip this part first. About the NPSH again, our main objective usually start with this one. Okay, usually start with the NPSH available has to be above 0, but that is actually only applied for ideal pump, okay, which is not exists. Okay, so if we start with the ideal condition, so let me change my all of this left hand side part of the equation. That's actually the NPSH available. Okay, so the formula of the NPSH is the delta pressure P suction minus by the vapor pressure. Okay, so that's the source, that's the source pressure. PS is the source pressure, should be known in the equation, source pressure. And then PV is the vapor pressure. So if it's a water, you just need to know about the vapor pressure of water at the required temperature. Or if you transport an alcohol, then you use the vapor pressure of the alcohol, or if it's an palm oil, then you use the vapor pressure of the palm oil. So that's gives us information about the deviation between the pressure at the source point compared to the vapor pressure where the first vapor will be formed. Okay, and then we have the elevation. Okay, it should actually plus minus. It could be plus, it could be minus. I will explain it in the next slide. So depending on the location, whether we have a pump above the source tank or the other way around. Okay, so there will be another case where the tank is above and then the pump will be below. Okay, and that's the ZS. So in this case, that's why the generic expression would be plus minus ZS. Sometimes it will be plus, sometimes it will be minus, depending on which unit is above the next one. Okay, HFS, again, HFS is a friction. So in this picture, all the friction happening from the source point to the entrance point of the pump, all of them are accumulated as the HFS, head of a friction in the suction part. So H refer to the head, F refer to the friction, S to the suction part. Okay, initially it has to be above zero. If we can maintain it above zero, then it's
Hello, sir. Your voice is not heard.
okay. Sorry for the disruption. Let me connect it back. Is it clear and my sounds clear? Can you confirm whether you can hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so again, this is the formula for the NPSH. When you combine everything at the left part of the equation, that becomes the NPSHA. A refers to available. That's the net positive suction head available at your entrance point. Okay, and it has to be above zero for ideal pump, but for most of the existing pump available in the market, it has to be above the NPSH required by pump. That's why it's called NPSHR, okay, required. As long as you can maintain that your available NPSH is above your required NPSH, it's 100% safe to operate the pump. Okay. Once the NPSH available is exactly the same with the NPSH required, that's when the cavitation starts to occur. The first vapor forms and it will cause a cavitation in your pump. Okay, so now please have a look at these two examples about the location of the pump versus the source of the tank. Okay, especially related with the ZS. Okay, which one will help to prevent cavitation? Okay, for case A, you actually have your source above your pump. Okay, and just imagine if you have a nozzle somewhere around here, because of the gravity, of course, it will flows naturally to the pump, right? It will flows naturally to the pump. Once you open this nozzle, then the water will fill the suction part of the pipe. And it's different with the second configuration or the second case where you have your pump above your source tank, because even though you already open 100% the opening at those tank, the water will not naturally fill the pipeline between the suction part, so it has to be sucked, right? So it's called suction because in this case, if the pump is not connected, if the pump is not turned on, then there is no way that water will fill the pipeline section between the tank and the pump because of the gravity and so on. So this refers to the notation of the ZS used in your NPSH calculation. Okay, if you have your pump below the tank, the ZS should be positive. Okay, it should be positive. Why? Because actually you put your pump in a better position to prevent cavitation. Okay, because of the gravity, it's just natural for water to flow into the pump. So that's why it's positive, because it's the higher the NPSH available from your pump, the better it is for you to prevent cavitation. Okay, because you want to keep it above 0 or above the available NPSH. Okay, meanwhile, in the second case where the pump is located above the source of the tank source, it will be negative, right? So this is trickier than the previous the case A. It still has to be positive, right? It still has to be positive if you want to avoid cavitation. But now your first fraction already negative, and then your HFS is also negative, because that's minus something positive. The fraction must be positive, right? So minus something positive. So the only way for you to avoid cavitation is to provide a high source pressure. Okay, so this must be positive. This must be positive to prevent any cavitation. So the only way to provide that is you have a very, well, not very, a quite safe source pressure. Okay, in the same system, same fluid system, where the only difference is the location of the pump, the case A1, maybe you can avoid cavitation with a relatively smaller source pressure, because your elevation actually helps you to prevent any cavitation. Okay, I'll stop my explanation here first to check if you have any questions about the formula and especially these two cases, please. Or is it clear? Okay, I'll continue first. So if you look at the picture, okay, that's the available NPSH. Again, the same formula, that should be plus minus, okay, depending on the location. If the pump is below, then it's plus. If the pump is above the source tank, then it's a minus. Then the final step would be to check the NPSH requirement, which is determined by the manufacturer. And for example, if you remember the cases last week from the pump curve, it can be determined using a pump curve. At that example, if I'm not mistaken, that the NPSH required by the pump is about 3 meter. Okay, so for example, around 3 meter. That means, so this is how it looks like at that's the required NPS. So let's say that's your selected flow volumetric flow rate, and that's your NPSH required. NPSH available has to be above the required. So as long as this is above the required, that will be safe to avoid cavitation. If above NPSH required, then it's a safe operation. Okay. NPSHR, then it's a safe operation to avoid cavitation. Okay. You can avoid cavitation. But the thing is, if you push your pump to operate it at a higher flow rate, you can start to push the condition where the cavitation start to occur. Okay, let's say that's the extrapolation. So that will be your Vmax to avoid cavitation. Otherwise, it's gonna be a problem for your operation. Vmax to avoid cavitation. Why is that? Can anyone help me to explain why if you increase your flow rate, why is the NPSH available will gradually decrease? Okay, it will gradually decrease. So look back at this formula. Which part will be bigger or will be lower when you change the flow rate of the liquid transported using the pump? Will it be the PS, PV, ZS, or the HFS? Which one will change when the flow rate change?
Is it the PV, sir?
So PV is a vapor pressure. Okay, that's the physical properties of the liquid. So if it starts to vaporize at 5 kPa, for example, at the same temperature, it will still be vaporized at 5 kPa. So it's purely determined by the physical properties of the fluid. So it remains relatively constant. Okay, ZS, that's elevation, so that's relatively constant. Regardless of our flow rate, the elevation between the pump and the tank will be the same. Okay, so which left us with two things. When we change the flow rate, does the source of the pressure change or the friction change?
Will it be the friction, sir?
Okay, yep. So that's actually the correct one. When the velocity increase, well, one by one your Reynolds will increase, and then of course your delta P will increase. Okay, it becomes more turbulent and so on. So your delta P will increase. So when your delta P increase, your overall head of friction in the suction part will increase. So that becomes more negative, right? When you increase the velocity, your NPSH available will gradually decrease because your delta P gradually increase. Okay, and at one point, your delta P becomes too much, where the water starts to vaporize, or the liquid start to vaporize before it enter the pump. Okay, so be careful about this. Some of the main point is you understand about the plus minus ZS, whether it's above or below, and then you have to calculate the HFS, which is very rigorous calculation, straight pipeline plus some fitting, elbow T, and so on. So it's quite rigorous calculation, requires maybe 15, 20 or plus minutes. Okay. Any questions about this explanation? So this is the example from the previous pump curve. Let's say you want to operate at 100 cubic meter per hour. So that's your NPSH required, which is around 3 meter. Okay, so that should be your NPSA available has to be above this number to prevent cavitation. So the question now, how can I provide positive NPSH? Okay, so of course you don't want your pipe to be too long. Okay, you want your pipe to be sufficient. Okay, not too long, because if it's too long, then your HFS will be very high. Okay, and then how about the suction pressure? Okay, in this case, you want to operate at atmospheric pressure, then you don't have any choice because it's atmospheric pressure. If it's really needed, then your option to prevent cavitation may be for you to pressurize the source, okay, or make it very high elevation. Okay, so let's say you have the full tank capacity is 10 meter, for example. That gives you hydrostatic pressure, right? Because that gives you another rho GH. That's you get hydrostatic pressure by providing this level of 10 meter, for example. That's another 1 bar. Okay, 1000 times 10 times 10, that becomes another 1 bar only by providing a level of 10 meters. So that helps you in a way to prevent any cavitation as well. Or maybe you can locate your pump better. Okay, you put it somewhere underground. That can help you to prevent any cavitation. But that's not always be the case. Okay, again, the obvious example is again your water well, as explained in the previous case, where you try to find a water well in your home because you don't get PDAM supply, for example. So sometimes it's not convenience for us to put the pump underground. Okay, so you can imagine a water well that's actually already, let's say, 30 meter or something in a big city. So you want to prevent cavitation, and then you put your pump underground. So you drill a hole and then you put your pump underground. So it's not easy to be operated. It's not easy when it breakdowns and so on. Okay, so for this kind of case, it's not preferable, but from NPSH perspective, but for operational perspective, you put your pump at the ground level, right? At the ground level, because that's easy to be controlled. It's easy to be linked to the electricity supply, and so on and so on. Okay. Okay. Any question about this? So for some heuristic, or this is like a rule of thumb or best practice from industry. Okay, there is a good book about this, not only for pump, but this is like a summary for all of the main equipment in chemical engineering, which is Turton. So they give you some kind of summary about the typical numbers for pumps. So you can see that some of the thing that could be useful for you, again, your NPSH must be in excess of a certain number, as I explained, okay, depending on the pump and the condition, if damage is to be avoided by cavitation. Okay, the common range for the NPSH required by pump is around 1.2 to 6.1 meter. Okay, so which pump do you think is better or safer if you have your the type A? Let's say your NPSH required is 2 meters, and type B, with the other performance remains the same, will be 5 meter. Which pump is safer, do you think, to be operated? The 2 meter one or the 5 meter one? let's say you have exactly the same pump curve, exactly the same power requirement. Okay, the only difference is the price and the NPSH required. One pump requires you to provide 2 meters of NPSH required, and the type B or the brand B require you to provide 5 meter of NPSH. Which one is safer in terms of preventing any cavitation?
Maybe A, sir.
Okay, yeah, that's correct. It's safer for you to buy the brand A pump, but most likely it will be more expensive compare your brand B. Okay, because you just need to provide available NPSH 2 meter, 2.5 meter. That will be enough for you to prevent cavitation. But when you're using the same available NPSH and you force it to be used in the second brand, it will be a problem within a short time of operation. Okay. So some of the things that again useful, again just for your general knowledge. Okay, centrifugal pump for a single stage, typically that would be the range of flow rate required. If it's less than 0.05, then you're more likely need to use another type of pump. Same thing with the above 19 cubic meter, maybe you need at least 2 pumps or other type of pump. And maximum height typically around 150 meter. Okay, for multiple stage, then the maximum height can be much higher. Okay, and the efficiency it varies a lot. Okay, it varies a lot. Some pump could be as worse as 45 to 50%. That's already considered very bad pump operation. But in general, it will be, I think, around 70 to 75, 65, 70 to 75. That's the most of the pump operation works, the efficiency. 80% would be considered as a very excellent pump efficiency. Okay, and 20% will be lost to the environment as a heat. Okay, and same thing, this is again just for selection purpose or for quick comparison purpose. Axial pump will be good if you need head to be relatively small at 12 meter. But if you need a very high head or delta P, then you need to use a rotary pump or even a reciprocating pump. Okay. For the fan on blower, it's quite simple again because as I mentioned last week, it's only able to increase small delta P for gas. Okay, fan or blower is not used for liquids; it's used for gas, but only able to provide small delta P. Okay, less than 1 bar incremental. Okay. So if you enter at atmospheric pressure, at most it will be less than 2 atm at the discharge part of the blower. It's already a very good blower. Yeah, the standard blower probably only able to give you like 1.2, 1.3 atm, something like that. Okay, because it's only able to provide small delta P. If you need high delta P for a gas, then go to compressor, which will be discussed in Thursday. Okay. And because it's relatively behaves as a non-compressible process, because the delta P is very small, so the duty calculation will can be calculated using the same formula with the pump. So because of a small delta P, okay, that's a big disclaimer, because if you have high delta P, then this assumption will not hold together again. Okay. So because it's a small delta P, then it behaves like a non-compressible, then the duty can be simply calculated as V times delta P. Okay. Later when you need an efficiency, then again the same thing. You just need to divide with the efficiency to get your actual power requirement. In terms of the shape, again, it's just depending on the physical properties of the gas. Okay, do you have any dirt or solid fraction in your gas or in your air? And then corrosivity, again, another things to be considered about your shape and your material of the blade. Okay, but it's not as complex as the compressor, again, because the delta P is very limited in this type of application. Okay, so any question before I discuss about the examples about the pump? Any questions? Okay, let me start then. Consider a piping system that must deliver water at a rate of 275 GPM. So this example is coming from Darby, okay, Darby book, which I attach in the MS team. If you wanna study it later, okay, even I think it's chapter 8, somewhere around those number. Okay, so check on that. Water of 275 GPM from one storage tank to another. Okay, both of which are at atmospheric pressure. So that's P1 and P2 equal to 1 atm. Okay, with the level of the downstream tank being 50 feet higher than in the upstream tank. Okay, do I have the picture? I don't think so. So you have one tank over here, and then it will be sent using a pump to elevated atmospheric tank. Okay, so the delta elevation is around 50 feet. The piping system contains 65 of 2 inches Schedule 40 pipe, 1 globe valve, and 6 elbow. Okay, so maybe that's 1 elbow, 2 elbow, 3 elbow. So yeah, there will be another 3 elbows in the system. Okay. And the pump characteristic is shown in figure 8.2, which is provided in the next slide. Okay. Yep. So what the diameter impeller should be used with this pump, and then what motor horsepower will be required to transfer this water from tank A to tank B. Okay, so this is a very standard pump and pipe calculation. Okay, it's required in a lot of different application, even in your lab, in your office, in your home. To calculate the pump requirement, it should be using the same principle, or even in a chemical plant, of course, it's going to be applied. Okay, so maybe I'll just quick give the one by one, step by step calculation, but I will not recalculate the number, only the step and the formula, and then you can confirm if you have any question or struggling with the where should I get this number, and so on and so on. Okay, so again, because we are talking about a flow system between A and B, it must relate back to the Bernoulli equation. Okay, so if you have your point A and point B, and then you have your point suction before the pump, and then you have your discharge after the pump, that's the 4 important points that you need to be aware with the calculation. Okay, so of course you want to build the Bernoulli. Okay, I think this is the Bernoulli. Okay, now you just have to imagine which part you you don't have the number at the moment. Okay, do you have your delta Z? Do you have your delta P? Do you have your delta velocity? You don't have this for sure, the pump duty, and do you have your EF? Okay, can someone help me to confirm whether you have the information about the delta Z or not? Which part give you information about the delta Z, or it's not yet provided? What's delta Z?
Is the delta Z 50 feet, sir?
Okay, that's the delta elevation. So we know the numbers about this, right? 50 feet. It's already available. No issue to put this in the Bernoulli. Delta P, do we have something about the delta P? When we compare the Bernoulli 1 and 2, sorry, not 1 and 2. Okay, that's my bad. A and B. Any clue, any implied information about the pressure at the point A and point B? Anyone?
Is it the one which, like, both of which are at atmospheric pressure?
Okay, both of which are at atmospheric pressure. Okay, what does that tell you?
0, sir.
Okay, delta P is equal to 0 because both of which are atmospheric pressure. Open tank. Okay. How about the delta velocity? Velocity at tank A and velocity at tank B. Okay, so actually for this one, you just have to make sure about the size of the size of the pipeline. Okay, if the pipeline size remains the same, then you will have V1 will be equal. Well, not one. VA will be the same with VB at same pipe ID. Okay, at the same pipe. So in this one, it was stated that the piping system contains of 2-inch of a pump of a pipe. Okay, that means if you have 2-inch over here, that you will also have 2-inch over here. Okay, because the mass balance remains the same, because the surface area remains the same, then of course your velocity will always be the same between point A and point B. This is for non-compressible. The volume doesn't change, the density doesn't change, the surface area doesn't change. Your meter per second will not change as well. Okay. So actually you have enough information to finish the left side equation of the Bernoulli system. But now how about the right side equation? Do you know your pump duty requirement, and do you know your EF, your friction? Both of them has not been mentioned or calculated. So in order for you to finish the Bernoulli equation, the energy equation system, you have to calculate your EF first. Okay, you have to calculate your EF first. Calculate your EF, your friction, and then put it in the Bernoulli or the energy system, then you can calculate your pump duty or the pump energy requirement. So that's the step. You cannot start directly with the pump operation if you don't know how much pressure or how much energy has to be compensated to compensate the friction in the pump, in the pipeline. Okay, so again, most of your first step will be to calculate the EF, the friction factor. Okay, which hopefully has been explained by Pak Wawan. Okay, what would be your first step to calculate EF? Maybe I don't use a number, maybe just use a bullet point to give it a relative flexible sequence. How can you calculate EF for a straight pipeline plus fitting? Okay. So the EF is for a straight pipeline plus fitting. That is for the 65 or 2 inches schedule 40 pipe, 1 globe valve, and 6 elbows. And then it was mentioned that for a pipeline, then your fitting K would be FLD. For every elbow, you can use K1 as 800 or as KD as 4. For every globe valve, you will face some restriction, where the K1 will be equal to 1500 or the KD is equal to 3.6. So for overall, for the fitting, it was given in Darby that the fitting resistance can be calculated. That's your K1, that's your KI, that's your KD. Then you need to calculate your Reynolds, okay, and the diameter of the pipeline. Okay, so before we go further into the fanning chart and so on, of course you have to start with the Reynolds. But before you go into the Reynolds, so you know that it must have something to do with the Reynolds. But before you can calculate the Reynolds, you have to calculate the velocity. So that means you need to know the diameter of the pipeline. The pipeline inside diameter, and then your velocity. Does this provide it in the example? How can you calculate the inside diameter pipeline? Which statement or which information provides you the step required to calculate the inside diameter of the pipeline?
Is it the schedule 40, sir?
Yep. So that must be a function of 2 inches and SN40. Okay, you go into the table, check what is the diameter of a pipe with 2-inch nominal pipeline, NPS, with a schedule number of 40. Okay, and then you get what's the millimeter or the inches of the inside diameter of the pipeline. Then you need to know the velocity. Okay, if you want to calculate everything here as in British, then how can you find the feet per second or the meter per second? Feet per second or meter per second? Which inputs has to be used to calculate the linear velocity? how can you convert this GPM into feet per second or meter per second? So from GPM, gallon per minute, right? Gallon is already volumetric per time basis, minute time basis. So it's actually comparable or equivalent to cubic feet per second. Okay, go to Google how to convert GPM into cubic feet per second. The conversion from gallon to cubic feet, minute to second, 60. Okay, so afterwards you get your cubic feet per second. You divide it by your cross section of the pipeline. Your cross section of the pipeline now can be calculated from your inside diameter. Okay, so your inside cross area now would be, what's the formula? Phi d square per 4. So that gives you your square feet. Okay, square feet. So now this can be done, the feet per second can be done by dividing the 275 GPM divided by the inside diameter. But be careful about the unit. Okay, convert it to cubic feet per second. Convert it to cubic feet per second divided by the square foot. Okay, now you get your feet per second. Okay, any question up until this point? Then you can calculate your Reynolds rho v. Okay. If the number is not provided, then you can assume the typical density and the typical viscosity. If the number is provided, use the density and the viscosity directly. But if the number is not provided, then you can assume the typical physical properties of the water. Okay. The velocity, the feet per second or the meter per second will be used in the Reynolds. The inside diameter will be used in the Reynolds as well. Any questions so far? After that, you calculate your EF. Okay, you calculate your friction. Now it's time for you to calculate the EF. The total friction in the pipeline. So depend on your on the numbers provided. Okay, this is that's some of the formula used for you to calculate the drop in straight pipeline. Okay, for okay, now you find that. Okay, find F. So I think 15 to 20 minutes to manually calculate this, or even more. Find from Freining chart. For a straight pipeline, you have your length of the pipeline. It's provided that it's 16 feet meter. Your diameter, you already calculate that. Your velocity, you also already calculate that in feet per second or in meters. Need to calculate the delta P in the fitting, the friction in the fitting. Okay, if it's in the fitting, then you have two options. So now for fitting, fitting is elbow, T, globe valve. For fitting, do you want to calculate in L per D equivalent? L per D equivalent. Or do you want to work in KF? Both of them are fine and should give you the same results as long as if it's consistent. Okay, so if you want to work in L per D equivalent, then you just put the sum of all the L per D every fitting in your system, so that the pipe and then plus the L per D of the elbow and so on. Okay, and the L per D is can be calculated using the conversion, this conversion. Okay, you know your K, and then you know your F, then L per D equivalent can be calculated. That's the KF. Same thing. Or you want to work using everything is in KF. That's again, it's give this at the end of the question. If you want to use with the KF, then put everything in KF. KF of the pipe, plus KF of the elbow, plus KF of the valve, okay, put everything. Now you have your KF. So you can calculate the overall EF, okay, using the same formula over here. So change L per D now with EF. Okay, because for FFL per D is KL, then it becomes 0.5 times K times U square. That becomes your EF. Okay, to be more precise, it's also to be more complete. It's you can also plus the sudden enlargement and sudden contraction in your system. If you want to be very, very precise about this calculation, because pressure drop doesn't only happen in the fitting and the pipeline, it also happens in the sudden contraction or in the sudden enlargement. Okay. That cause another delta P. Why? Because over here you have a sudden contraction where very wide tank become contracted when it goes to the 2 inches pipeline. Contraction. Okay. Over here where the nozzle from 2 inches open to the big tank, that's where you have your sudden enlargement. So again, hopefully Pak Wawan already explained to you about the formula about the sudden enlargement and sudden contraction. Okay, and that's Ivano. So at the end of this step, you should be able to get your overall EF. And then you go to the energy equation to calculate pump work. Calculate pump work. Yep, one. Now you have your F. So the only fraction unknown here is the ideal pump. Okay, that's your ideal pump. Then last step, you go to the pump curve. Go to the pump curve. Check your flow versus head required. Okay, so in short, this is how it will looks like when you go into the pump curve. Okay, again, because of the time limitation, go to the chapter 8.1 in Darby. Okay, you have your capacity at 275 GPM, so that's your flow capacity. And based on the calculation, it was known that it's available in the slide. Okay, everything that I just explained. So the K total, everything, okay, and then the required head will be 219 feet. When you add everything, the delta P, the delta Z, and then the friction. This is the friction. Okay. Now you know that the pump has to be able to provide 219 feet of head. Okay. So again, by plotting this to be 219, that's the intersection of your operating condition. So now you will have to choose to downsize the impeller to 7¼ because it's not exactly intersects with your points, or you want to upsize to 7¾ inch of impeller. And of course, it's always to upsize the size. So to answer the first question, it's actually you have to diameter from up, which is 7¼ inch. So that will be able to answer this first question. What diameter impeller should be used with this pump? And what motor horsepower would be required? You know the work of the pump ideally, and then check the efficiency. Okay. In this case, the efficiency should be somewhere in the 48, 47-ish %. So using this efficiency divided it by 0.48 something, you will get your horsepower pump requirement. Okay. So please learn about this more. Okay, on at your free time, check on Darby example 8.1. Okay, maybe I'll use the time on Thursday to make sure that you understand about this example, or if you have any question after you study about this example. And also, because this is very important, I'll give homework to you. It should be done in 2 days before the next session, 10 a.m. 21 October of 2021. Okay, the same system from pump 1 and tank 1 and tank 2. If you are able to answer this question up until the NPSH, I think you've done your part to understand the pump calculation in overall. I will upload this homework later this today. Okay. So the result. Okay, you are interested for the
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.